Welcome to Frostbitten Tales. Tonight's story takes us back to the year 1890, a time of outlaws, horses, and hard men trying to carve a living out of frozen land. But there are some places you shouldn't settle, some creatures you shouldn't hunt. This is the story of Levi McGraw, and the night he learned why his father warned him never to answer voices calling from the woods. This is the Outhouse Incident, a cowboy's revenge. My name's Levi McGraw, and in 1890, I lived with my father on a cattle ranch just outside Tombstone, Arizona. Cold winds had come early that year, frosting over the dirt and silencing the coyotes. Even the sun seemed to set quicker, as if it didn't want to linger in these parts. I remember that night as clear as whiskey. Pa had just eaten a big dinner, beans, cornbread, and jerky. The kind of meal that left a man content enough to forget about the troubles of the world. He leaned back in his chair, lit a smoke, and let out a long, satisfied belch. "Boy," he grunted, patting his stomach, "I'm off to unload last week's chili." I smirked, leaning back against the table. "Don't fall in this time," I called after him. He waved me off without looking back. That was the last time I saw him alive. The outhouse sat maybe 30 yards from the house beyond the corral, standing alone like some stubborn sentry against the tree line. The moon was big that night, full and swollen, making the frost sparkle like a field of tiny knives. Somewhere off in the distance, a lone gust rattled the dry mesquite branches. 20 minutes passed, then 30. The old man could be slow when the whiskey was working through him, but still, too long. I figured maybe he'd fallen asleep in there. Wouldn't have been the first time. So I grabbed the lantern from the wall and stepped into the night. The cold hit like a wet slap. I could see my breath drifting in the air, hanging there too long before fading away. The world felt off, like the air itself was listening. No wind, no coyotes. Even the cattle were still, their eyes catching the lantern light as I passed. They didn't make a sound, but their ears twitched toward the trees. When I reached the outhouse, I noticed the door wasn't shut all the way. It rocked on its hinges, the creak slicing through the silence like a knife. "Pa?" I called, my voice sounding smaller than I meant it to. No answer. I pushed the door open, holding up the lantern. And that's when my stomach dropped. Blood. It was splattered across the snow in thick, dark streaks, steaming in the moonlight. The smell hit a moment later, hot copper, raw and fresh. His boots were lying on their sides near the path, laces still tied. But there was no body, just drag marks, long smeared trails in the frost. The snow clumped where something heavy had been pulled. On the outhouse walls, claw marks, not scratches from nails, not scrapes from an animal pawing. These were long, deep gouges that had chewed through the wood in splintered curls, and they were too high, far higher than any cougar or black bear could reach. My hands started to shake so bad the lantern rattled against its metal frame, the flame flickering. I thought about running back to the house. I thought about pretending I hadn't seen any of it. But Pa's voice was in my head, from all those nights when he'd had too much to drink and the firelight made him look 20 years older. "If it ever comes for you, boy, don't let it take you into the trees." I looked toward the dark line of pines, their shadows stretching long and black across the snow. The drag marks led straight into them, swallowed by the dark. And in that moment, I knew what had happened. I knew what had taken him. It was the thing Pa always warned me about, the thing he swore was real, even when sober. the Wendigo, and somewhere beyond that tree line, it was still hungry. I was 9 when Pa first told me about the Wendigo. We were sitting by the fire one winter night when the wolves were howling. "Son," he said, "there's things in these woods that ain't never been men, but wear skin like they used to be. They're always hungry, always cold, and they sound like people you know. That's how they get you." I laughed back then, thought it was just whiskey talk. But after that night by the outhouse, I wasn't laughing. With tears streaming down my face, I ran back to the house and barricaded myself inside. When the sun finally rose, I saddled up my horse Dust and rode into town to retrieve the sheriff. He and a couple of other townsmen followed me back to the gruesome scene. After inspecting the outhouse and the trail of blood, he told me the same line all lawmen tell when they're scared. "Probably a bear, son. They get aggressive this time of year." But the look in his eyes told me he didn't believe it either. One of the other men stated we should hunt it down and kill it since it now has a taste for men. But the sheriff quickly dismissed the idea. "Sorry, son," he said. He and the other men mounted their horses and began to head back into town. As I stood there watching them ride off, I could only think of my pa, his face when he smiled, his laugh when he had a little too much whiskey, and our many nights together when he was teaching me to hunt. At that moment, it wasn't sadness I was feeling, it was rage. And the only thing that I was hearing in my head was when one of the other men said we should hunt it down and kill it. Maybe I wasn't thinking logically, but I made up my mind. I was going to kill this thing and avenge my pa. I went inside and packed Pa's old Spencer rifle, a hunting knife, 3 torches, and the last bottle of his firewater. I mounted Dust and followed the blood trail north into what was known as Black Hollow Woods, where no sane man dared to ride after dusk. The place was wrong, cold even in summer. No birds, no animals, just silence and bones buried beneath the frost. That first night, I made camp near a rock outcrop. I didn't dare sleep. Not really. Every snap of a twig made my skin crawl. Then, somewhere around midnight, I heard it. Levi. It was Pa's voice, ragged and soft, calling from beyond the firelight. I nearly answered, but I remembered his words. "Don't answer. Don't you ever answer." Then something stepped into view. Tall, skeletal, wrapped in torn skin like rawhide, antlers rising like twisted tree limbs from a skull too long to be human. Its eyes glowed faint blue like ice, no pupils, no soul. The Wendigo. It didn't run, it just watched. I raised the rifle and fired, missed. It moved like smoke, slipping between trees, fast but silent. I gave chase, lantern swinging, heart pounding in my chest like a war drum. The only noise I could hear was my footsteps and Dust going berserk tied to the tree beside the campsite. The forest twisted the deeper I went. Trees bent the wrong way. Snow melting in patches revealing bones, not soil. Antlers hung from branches like wind chimes. Then I found the first body, or what was left of it. A man's corpse, shredded, face missing, still wearing a miner's badge. I wasn't hunting the Wendigo. It was leading me. The trail led me to a cave, hidden behind a dead waterfall, tucked in the throat of the mountain. Inside that cave, it wasn't just cold that hit me, it was death, ancient, hungry. The air was thick, still, like the world itself had stopped breathing. I crept deeper, my boots crunching on something that didn't sound like rock. I looked down, bones, Piles of them, hundreds, maybe more, cleaned, stripped, some cracked open at the ends, split right down the middle like kindling, for marrow. But it wasn't the bones that made my stomach turn. It was the clothes. A child's shoe, scuffed and tiny. A woman's bonnet, rotting and stiff. A man's belt with a cracked buckle. A sheriff's badge, tarnished, bent. And there, draped over a jagged stone like a flag on a coffin, Pa's red flannel shirt, stained black at the chest. I fell to my knees, couldn't breathe. My fingers curled into the dirt. That's when I heard it. Breathing, not mine. Slow, wet, deliberate. It was behind me, close enough that I felt the air shift on my neck. I turned, and it grabbed me. Its hand was cold, iron cold, skin like dry leather pulled over barbed wire. Black claws sank into my shoulder. I screamed. It didn't. It just watched me, eyes like burning coals sunk deep in its skull. The face, if you could call it that, was a patchwork of dried skin and twisted antlers, a grin carved into rotten lips. I drove my hunting knife straight into its throat. Hot black blood sprayed across my face. It sizzled like acid. The thing reeled back, screaming. A sound I'll never forget. It wasn't human, wasn't animal. It was the sound of metal being bent, of wolves dying, of trees groaning under winter ice. I ran. My shoulder was torn. My head spun. My rifle slipped from my numb fingers. I don't even remember making it out of the cave, just snow and blood and the taste of iron in my mouth. I collapsed beneath a pine, coughing up warmth into the frost. And then I heard it again. That breathing. It had followed. Slow, steady, confident. It knew I wasn't going anywhere. I reached into my coat, my last chance, the fire water. Not whiskey, real fire water. Homemade. Stuff that could peel paint off a wagon. I poured it over my knife, my hands shaking so bad I spilled half of it in the snow. Struck a match. The blade ignited, blue and violent. The Wendigo stepped from the tree line. Smoke clung to it like mist. Its limbs too long, too wrong. Its ribcage pulsed like a second heart. It opened its mouth, rows of black, jagged teeth. A low moan spilled out. Not pain, hunger. It lunged. I waited until it was inches away, until I could smell the rot on its breath. Then I drove the burning knife straight into its chest. The flame didn't flicker, it exploded. The Wendigo howled. It stumbled back, clawing at its own ribs as fire ran across its skin like lightning through dry grass. The trees shook. Snow rained down from the branches. Its screech turned into a shriek, then something worse, a sound that made my ears bleed and my vision swim. Still screaming, it turned and fled, back toward the cave. But I was ready. I dragged myself up, teeth clenched, vision blackening, reached into my belt, my last stick of dynamite. I lit it, counted 2 seconds, and threw. The explosion ripped through the mountainside. Rocks tumbled, trees snapped, and the cave, its cave, collapsed in a thunder of stone and smoke. The Wendigo vanished beneath it all. I made it back to town 2 days later, half dead, my shoulder dislocated, feverish, dragging my horse which had gone lame and half mad from the cold. I was covered in blood, some mine, some not. They took one look at me and locked me in the doctor's cellar for a week. Said I was sick, delirious, talking nonsense. No one believed me, but the sheriff. He retired the next month, moved far south, and nobody ever went near Black Hollow again. They said it was bad land, cursed, full of sinkholes. I didn't argue. Now I live in Wyoming. A quiet place. Dry. Sunny. No woods. No outhouses. Just indoor plumbing. But some nights, when the prairie wind comes howling across the plains, I swear I hear him, my papa calling from the darkness, from the woods behind the barn. But there ain't no woods behind the barn, not for miles. So I keep the lights on, keep a shotgun by the door, and I never answer. You've been listening to Frostbitten Tales, where shadows whisper and nightmares never thaw. If you made it this far, you're one of the few still breathing for now. Subscribe, like, comment, and join me next time when the frost comes creeping for you.